The weather's finally starting to break. We had a ton of cold weather going on for a bit. It felt like this winter was unusually long, but we're slated for about 15 degrees today, which is pretty cool. Which, for those of you who aren't Canadian, means we're pretty much getting into t-shirt weather. But one thing, I got a sales training planned in the next hour or so. And something that I observe, because I still get into homes, I do a lot of, for those of you who aren't aware, I do exterior sales. I train it, I coach it. I'm the sales operations manager for my company, which is just a fancy term for saying I help develop sales processes, sales training, platforms, as well as sales training materials. And I still get inside houses. I still want to see what's going on. I want to help consultants out in the field. And one of the things that I constantly see when I shadow salespeople is a lot of times they are not as good at building rapport with customers as they think they are. It's probably one of the most overstated things that salespeople claim that they're capable of doing very well, but they don't do that well at all. And what I mean is this. I went into a house last week. I was with a consultant, and this consultant, nice kid, but he starts talking to the customer, and instead of really asking good open-ended questions to learn about his customer, he pretty much talked about himself and kept asking closed-off questions so he could get back to talking about himself. And he didn't even realize he was doing it. When I talked to him after the appointment, he said to himself, or he said to me, sorry, that I thought I did really good. I thought that was a really good appointment. They seemed to really like me. And I'm looking at it as someone who's literally shadowing. I'm not really saying a whole lot there. And what I'm seeing from my perspective is that this guy railroaded those people, and he didn't stop talking about himself. He didn't get them to open up in any way that could have helped the sales process, could have helped him, could have made the customers feel more at ease. Now, granted, these were really nice people, so I don't think the level of rapport building needed to happen there like it would on some other appointments that I've been on. But in this circumstance, this consultant definitely missed the mark. And how do I say this? It was one-sided. It was great that he was talking, but one of the biggest illusions that salespeople have is because they're talking so much, they think they're doing 10 times better than they actually are. The best salespeople, in my experience, tend to be salespeople who can ask intelligent questions, good open-ended questions, and get that customer to open up more in that sales process. And the more they can do that, the easier those sales appointments become. And oftentimes they seem like they're almost lap drops, but it's not that they're lap drops. It's that those customers felt so at ease with that salesperson that they were willing to spend more money or spend money with them generally because they felt like that was someone they could trust. And I think the biggest disconnect that a lot of salespeople have is sales isn't about being, how do I say this wordsmith who can make things sound better than they are. And sorry, that is an aspect of sales. But what I mean is talking really well about yourself isn't sales. Trying to make something sound really, really good when it doesn't help somebody or respond to their needs or their worries or their concerns, it's not good. Good salespeople listen with intent. And they get those customers to open up and tell you what they're trying to accomplish, tell you what they're interested in, tell you what they're passionate about, and your solution becomes a response to that. And if you can do that in the sales process, you will do very well. It's one of the biggest differentiating factors that I notice from salespeople who might not be so good at pitching. They might not be so good at even the way my sales process that I teach works, but they're very good at listening and very good at responding to those customers to help them. But that all starts at the rapport building stage. And the rapport building stage, just so I can give a good definition, because I don't want to be one of these weird guys on the internet who just says a bunch of big claim shit and I actually give you no idea on what I mean by that. What good rapport building is to me is I can leave that sales appointment, whether I sold it or not, and I can go and have a beer with one of my good friends, and I can say, you're never going to believe who I met. I met an individual who helped fund, found, and start BlackBerry. And he was telling me the whole ins and outs of that business. Now, that's just an example, right? But my point to that is, it's a fun fact. It's an interesting factoid about that person that makes me feel like I've built a personal connection with them. If I can get to that point in the rapport building stage, I've done a good job. But if that rapport building stage just consisted of, well, I met Greg and Margaret, and they have owned this house for 20 years. Greg's a retired factory worker. That's not necessarily learning anything about them. A good rapport building situation really has to do with being able to learn about that person, care about that person, and find interest in that person. And executing that can be easier for some people and harder for some people. And I'm going to have some subsequent videos on how to really break that down. But ultimately, one of the biggest weaknesses I notice with salespeople is they are way worse at rapport building than they let on. And it's something that, in my opinion, can be trained and you can get better at. But being knowledgeable of knowing that that's your weakness for a lot of salespeople is half the battle. Because just like that consultant that I talked about earlier, who was talking all about himself in this appointment, after really explaining it to him and really breaking it down and saying, hey man, you didn't really learn anything about that customer and you didn't really build any solid rapport. You just talked about yourself. And he reflected, and his ego was hurt a bit, but he was like, you know what, you're right. I think I was a little nervous. I think I was just trying to struggle on what to say. And we worked on a couple strategies on how to get him more on track in those scenarios so he can build better rapport and learn to really appreciate and understand the customers that are in front of him.